What's up, everybody? Welcome into the podcast. Today is the 21st of July, 2017. It's crazy to me, like, how quickly this year is gone. It's already almost the end of July. And honestly, I'm like, what have I done this year? Because there hasn't been any, like, big groundbreaking things. But I've been in my job for almost 9 months. It doesn't seem like that long. I go every Monday through Friday. It seems like. The first time I worked there, I had some things going on, and I would call in sick, and I got kind of in trouble with the attendance policy at the job. They have these things called incidences, and you can only have so many a year, per year. And it's something like 7. And you get like one incident every time you call in without like giving warning first. And I thought the system was stupid because how are you going to knowingly call in sick? I mean, that's what they want you to do is like, hey, I'm going to be sick tomorrow. So, that's how you avoid the incident. Because if you wake up sick and it's something like 16 hours ahead of your shift, which I get off my shift and it's already, 12 hours towards my shift. Or 16 hours is when I get off my shift. And I was always like, that's so dumb. How are you supposed to know you're going to be sick? So, I'd call in sick and I'd get in trouble. I wasn't actually sick. I always had something going on. And with the job that I went to, I actually had like a schedule of jobs that I had to complete, and so I had to be there every day. Plus, when your boy is like your boss, then you can't be dipping out on work, because he knows better. And so coming back, then I really tried my best to kind of continue that attendance. I think I've only missed 2 days since I've worked there that I was legitimately sick. And I did the whole call. I was like, man, I don't feel very well. I'm leaving work right now. I might not be in tomorrow. And my boss is really cool about it. And he's like, okay, cool. He also knows oh yeah, were you sick? Were you actually sick? I called in sick on my birthday. And I was actually kind of ill on my birthday. But they were like, yeah, you missed your birthday for work. Next time, just take it off. It's not a big deal. And I don't know where I was going with this. Oh, so there's the attendance policy essentially I thought was dumb. But I haven't ever had a problem with it this year. And for me, I'm like, that's a personal win. My current manager doesn't know, the struggles that I had previously. But because of it, I'm actually accumulating time off, and I took 32 hours of paid time off to go to California, and I still have almost 32 hours left. And it's been nice. It's nice working for a company like that. I mean, I don't get paid as much as I think I would like to, but the benefits have been nice. I get a company match with my 401k, and I contribute every paycheck. So my 401k this year has actually doubled just because of contributions. I'm not doing terrible on the investment income, but it's not to a point yet that it makes a big difference. I'm doing something in between 14 to 20% I have 2 different 401ks actually, and between the 2 of them it kind of evens out around 14%. And I was reading this investment prospectus from Fidelity, and they were talking to me about how ideally you'd like to save 1x your income. And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I'm not even close to that. There's no way. If I continue my current pace, I would still be about half short of my income by the time I hit 30, which is their target. They're like, by 30, you should have 1 times your salary in investments. And this is something that like my dad preaches, and he's been very successful with his investments, and so it's fun to talk to him and kind of get a feeling. But at the same time, I'm like, man, I'm not making as much money as I'd like with the investments, but it's so cool to see, I'm not missing that money when it goes out of my check. I'm not worried about it. I don't even think about it because it's pre-taxed and it goes out, and then I'm like, well, look at this money that I've actually saved this year. And that's pretty cool. Something like 60% of Americans don't have $1,000 in savings. In my savings account, that's entirely true. Luckily, I have that investment income that I can work with, and I'm really fascinated by investing and investments. I'm not very good at it. I kind of have a general knowledge, and it's helped me get to where I am, but there's just so much more that I can learn. My Roth IRA that I have is not doing well at all, and I actually don't contribute to it. And so, essentially, I'm just paying fees on it and losing money. I mean, I make investment interest, but it's never more than my fees each year. So I end up losing money every year on it, and so I have to investigate moving that to my 401k and figuring all that out. I don't have the slightest idea of what to do, but luckily that's what financial planners are for, and I have a pretty good one that is actually with the company Ameriprise that I have the IRA with. I've been listening to podcasts this week a little bit because I can't listen to music at work all the time. It just drives me nuts, basically. I can listen, and then I get so tired of hearing music, and I gotta hear spoken word. And so I listen to just about every type of podcast. I listen to comedy ones. Anna Faris has an interesting one, and Hannibal Buress has an interesting one, and Chris D'Elia has an interesting one that I'll listen to those. And then Joe Rogan, comedian, but he wears a number of hats, and he just talks about random stuff. And then I listen to these history ones. Dan Carlin has a podcast called Hardcore History that is pretty amazing. The things he talks about, I'm like, these are things that they should teach in history class that would make school more interesting. Tons more interesting. And so, some of the interesting things, I guess, to share from this week. My parents have bats that live at their house. They usually come in the summertime. They stay all summer, and then they go to Mexico in the winter. And they've had them for quite a few years. Sometimes a bigger colony than others. Some years there's not very many bats, and then years like this year there's 400 plus bats in their house, like in their chimney. There's this little tiny crack in their chimney, and they have flown in there and made it their home. And so my mom's always out there like sweeping up this bat guano, bat poop. And I'd heard about it, you hear about bat guano, and it's bad, like, you don't want to inhale it, but there wasn't a whole bunch, like, I didn't know much about it. It makes really great fertilizer, I've heard. And so just on an off chance, I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about it. And they were talking about the fact that wars started over it. Over who could have it, who could collect the bat guano, because apparently they used it. It's nitrogen, so they could use it in explosives. People like Daniel Boone, when he ran out of gunpowder in the And so it's interesting to me that there were actual wars started over this. Like, people fight for control of it. And it makes sense. The people will fight for control over just about everything. I think that there's so many of these wars that have been started, and we look at the cause, and generally speaking, it's because somebody has something that somebody else doesn't have, and they want it. I mean, like, you look at the Revolutionary War, and we wanted independence and everything. That's great, but ultimately it's because we didn't want to pay these taxes to the British, and the British wanted our money. The Civil War, there's outcomes from all wars that are nice, freeing the slaves, stuff like that, but ultimately it's like, where is the money coming from? Where is that lining up from? Is it northern crops, southern crops, northern industry? The world wars, I mean, it's the biggest land grab. Essentially, Nazi Germany, Germany's the size of like Maine or something, and they almost took over the whole world. Like, they tried. They were trying to snatch land. And I've often wondered, like, why is it that people can't just leave other people's stuff alone? Out of all the crimes that just drive me nuts, I mean, all crime is bad, but the ones that I've never understood are like theft, burglary, stuff like that. Because I'm like, if you were in that situation, you'd be mad as hell that someone just jacked your stuff. So why would you do it to somebody else? And I guess some people don't, they don't think like I do, but they act like it's such a, oh, this isn't that bad. Like, I'm not killing somebody. You're not you're not raping somebody. But to me, it's like, just keep your hands to yourself. Like, I feel like I've been a victim of like theft more than the normal person should. In college, I had a backpack stolen out of my vehicle. I'm pretty sure my roommate, when he left the door open, and meth heads came in and stole my TV and my Xbox, which was awful because there were like 5 of us in that apartment, and my stuff was the only thing that went missing. And I was kind of bummed out that, nobody else got jacked, just me. I've had stuff stolen like numerous times. And I don't entirely know like what people's motivation is to steal some of the things that they steal. I had my wallet stolen in high school. I didn't have any money in it. I didn't have, like, I had my bank card, but that was canceled immediately when I noticed it was missing. And so, to me, it was like, is this just maliciousness? Because what a pain it is to cancel all your bank cards, cancel your credit cards, have to go into the DMV, get it, figure that all out with your driver's license. Some people carry their social security card, which I would never do, not in a million years. It just seems like people, for the most part, when it comes to crime, there's something to be gained. But sometimes I think that the gain is just sick enjoyment. For someone like to steal my wallet in high school, a high school kid's wallet, and then just like throw it out of that, maybe they felt better that, oh, that sucks for him. Stick it to him, but, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. I often think that in this country, like, crime is a real problem, but I also think that there's a lot of crime that goes unpunished, and a lot of crime that we don't regard really as crime. Kind of segue into the second thing I thought was really interesting. I had a college professor who was African American, and I was the only minority kid in his history class. So he took a real liking to me and always would use me in examples and bring me up, and for me that was like too much. I was a very quiet kid. I liked to sit at the back of the classroom, and that's when I went to class. But what was crazy to me was the things he chose to focus on were things that were important to him, not necessarily to the textbook or anything like that. We spent like a good week on things that black people had invented, which I thought was really neat. We don't talk about most of the things. Eli Whitney and the cotton gin is kind of the biggest thing. Peanut butter. But there were things like the stoplight. I didn't know that was invented by a black person. And then we talked so much about that. And he would say these things. He had some really out there theories. And some things that I'm like, man, I get that you're trying to have an opinion, but that's kind of a weird one. And he always talked about how the government introduced drugs into the ghettos in order to keep the black man down. And I always kind of disagreed with that because I was like, that doesn't make logical sense to me. And then I actually was reading, and part of that is true. Part of it is not true. Part of it's an interpretation. I didn't think that, the government's not, going and handing out free crack. There's not some guy who works for the government who's like, hey, let's get you hooked on crack so that you don't ever succeed and your ancestors never succeed, and we keep you in this cyclical poverty. And so then when I was reading about it, the Reagan administration, when crack was a huge problem in the inner cities, the government had a hand in that. However, they weren't handing it out in order to keep the black people enslaved, in a sense. A big part of it was the fact that they needed money, and they needed it in a way that they could have it kind of off the books, the government. And so how are they going to make a lot of money without printing it and raising suspicion? Because they did things with the money that maybe weren't above board. Things like Iran-Contra, where they exchanged weapons for prisoners. So that's kind of bad, that's a bad look. That's kind of like that border thing where they found out that the U.S. border agent was killed by American guns from the United States. They trade the trade-off for, drugs is, here, we'll sell you guns. We want to trace these guns back, but we actually don't know how we're going to trace these guns, and then you have problems. So they needed this money, and so they would get drugs from South America, these Contras, and they would help fund those. And in turn, they had to sell these drugs quickly to get a profit. So what better place to sell than in a place where there's not a lot of opportunity, there's more suggestibility, and, nobody forced people to do drugs. Nobody forced anyone to snort or smoke or shoot up. But in a sense, it's like if you put a piece of meat in front of a hungry animal, what's it going to do? It's going to eat it. And you know that. And so the government knew that they were going to be able to move product. And to me, that I was like, man, that's kind of a darker side of history that we don't. And did they teach that in the history books? Probably not. There's a lot of things like that. We glossed over internment camps. This is something that I'm really fired up about. In history classes, we always just kind of mentioned it. Oh yeah, there were also internment camps in the United States. I don't think that's something to gloss over. I think that's a real problem. I saw recently that here in Utah, the Topaz Mountain, Camp Topaz was a internment camp. And they recently opened a museum, and it has like some Japanese heritage stuff and things like that. And I'm like, man, how long did it take before that happened? 60, 70 years? Was it 70 years after that there's finally talked about? What are we going to do with honoring the people that had to go through that? Reparations for Japanese Americans didn't happen for 60 plus years after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Obviously, there was a lot of sore feelings. But at the same time, why don't we talk about that in our history books? And it's because there's a lot of nationalism and American pride, and so some of the things that are really bad, we don't talk about. We don't talk about the fact that they injected people with syphilis in order to test. That seems like an awful, awful part of American history. Excuse me. That we don't talk about. It makes a lot more sense to me that we would have more comprehensive textbooks at this point, but we still don't. It seems like education kind of slows down on what we learn and everything like that until you get to college, and that's where there's more innovative minds. Public high school, depending where you live, you might have the same textbooks that your parents did, maybe slightly updated. And I think that's almost a crime that people aren't being educated on what exactly is going on. I think that it's crazy that the government does things. Well, it's not crazy. I think it's interesting that we don't discuss what the government does in order to get things done. I always liked this show, Scandal, with Kerry Washington. But it made me wonder, how much does the government do that we don't even have any idea about? What kind of scandals happen that we don't know about because they're covered up by a cleaner, essentially, who goes in there and makes everything all right? Sometime maybe we'll figure that out. Who knows? It seems like years and years, and then something is declassified, and then we find out all these awful things. But I was wondering, the government does all the policing, essentially. It doesn't, and if it does police itself, why would it let its citizens know when it was messing up? That doesn't make any sense. I think the government does some things that would be interesting for us to know. I was watching a show that was recommended to me, and I instantly just latched on. I loved it. It's on Netflix, The Get Down. And I was like, man, what a time to be alive. These kids back then, where it was music, it was drugs, it was graffiti, disco, late 70s, early 80s, and what kind of deals go on in the government to get things done? These local politicians and stuff, they make deals, they carry out all sorts of illegal things in order to maybe do something better for the community. In the show, I mean, the local guy was involved with like having people start fires and, you know, making things worse in order to get a bid to make a better Brooklyn or Bronx, the Bronx. And the one character in there, he reminded the guy, he's like, the ends don't always justify the means. And I think that that's really true in a lot of aspects in our life. The ends don't always justify the means. Who are we stepping on in order to get to where we want to be? Are these things that we really want to be doing? I don't know. I guess I don't have a lot to say tonight. I've been struggling a little bit to stay positive. There's a lot of things like that I'll be thinking about, and then I get really negative with myself, and just drama, essentially, that shouldn't happen, I guess, because I'm 26 years old. I want to be out of that. I want to be away from that. I want to start a positive, like, adult life, you know? And it just seems like some of these things follow you around. History has a way of repeating itself. It has a way of creeping back up on you, and, you know, what can you do? Honestly, you can't do much. I was speaking with someone kind of about happiness, and, you know, it gave me some time to think about it, and I kind of realized happiness isn't a destination. It isn't like, you know, once I do this, then I'll be happy. Happiness has always been the whole entire journey that we take. And you're not going to be happy all the time. You're going to have heartache and hardships, and that's just life. Happiness is definitely important. But it isn't like, once I make this much money, I'll be happy. Once I have, you know, a girl that looks amazing, I'll be happy. Once I have a house, a beautiful house, and a huge yard, and, you know, space to do whatever I want, and cars that are fast. That's not what happiness, you know, is to, I don't think, to anybody. I mean, that might be their thinking, but all of the things that people associate with happiness, it's all covering up something bigger. And I've often wondered, I'm like, what am I going to do in order to be happy? And it's like, that's just it. That's what you do to be happy. You be happy. You're happy where you are. If you're not happy where you are, then you change your situation. And it's so hard. It is so hard. Remaining focused on things for me has been so hard recently. I can't dial in to anything really. And that's been difficult for me, because I want to be doing certain things with my life, but then I don't do them for whatever reason. You know, the drive isn't there. And I'm like, oh, I'll do it, you know, next week. And I thought about it more and more, and I'm like, I'm just putting off happiness, you know, because I'm not allowing myself to go places that I want to go. I'm making it difficult for myself to want these certain things. I guess I talk myself out of them. I talk myself out of a lot of things. And it's something I've mentioned earlier in podcasts. Self-sabotage has been huge. Ultimately, there are things that are just unrealistic, unattainable. For most people. You know, you can wish to be in the NBA all you want. But hey, I'm 5'11", don't really have a jumper anymore. Don't know if I ever really had one. Yeah, these things are not attainable, but it's like you have the opportunity to do just about whatever you set your mind to. The biggest obstacle, I think, for everybody is self-sabotage. It's telling yourself that you can't do something, or making excuses as to why you can't do something. I think that there's always a way for us to get things done. For me, external motivation is huge. People kicking me in the ass and saying, go do it. Here. This is where the application is. Go and do it. Do you need me to sit down with you? To start it with you? And it's like, no. At this point, I'm going to do it by myself because I don't want you to be doing things for me like that. But it's nice, the external motivation. Being challenged by external factors, by other people, what they're doing, that helps me quite a bit. And the thing I've worked on most this year is internal motivation. Being internally motivated in order to get what I want. And so far this year, there's been a couple instances, the internal motivation kicked in, and I did way too much, and I pushed off what I wanted, and it didn't work. And I'm like, man, that wasn't supposed to happen that way. That was not supposed to be how it was. I was supposed to be rewarded because I was doing all this work and doing what I was supposed to. But it just comes back to life is about taking your lumps, and what are you going to do about it? I mean, you're going to get knocked down throughout life. That's just what happens. But if you're going to get knocked down 7 times, you better be getting up 8 times. You better be doing all you can in order to always be on top. And if you don't do that, then you can't blame other people for it. Okay? That's my biggest thing is I don't like when people blame other factors. Oh, I could have done this if only this. I didn't get that promotion because of this. You know, there are things that are out of our control, but for the majority of our lives, our attitude, our work ethic determines where we end up. And a lot of people pretend like that's not true. It drives me nuts. I don't think that we can force anybody to be their best self. As parents, as friends, we can't give people ultimatums about being who they're supposed to be in our eyes, because ultimately, who they are is their choice. It's not about us and what we want for somebody or what we want for our kids or what we want for, really anybody, because ultimately everybody's their own person and everybody ends up where they want to. I guess I can't say want to end up, because some people end up places because of what they do, their actions. They may not want to end up there, but that's where they end up. Most of the prison population, ultimately, I don't think they wanted to end up in prison. That wasn't their goal. Like, hey, I think it would be great to, live somewhere for free, get 3 meals a day, get some time to work out, get big. I just can't leave when I want to. And there's people in there that might want to hurt me. Nobody in that situation, I think, wanted to end up there. But because of choices, that's where they ended up. Or other people's choices is why they ended up there. But that's not a reason to shift blame. I feel like I'm rambling. I feel like this podcast is awful. I don't know. I guess I'm ready for a change. And I'm ready to be in a different place with my life. And I've wondered how am I going to get there, or where exactly am I going? Because I don't know where I'm going. I kind of have an idea of what I want, but it's all logistically, how is this going to work out? And I'm excited because every day for me now, I used to be worried about it. Used to be worried about my day-to-day things. What shoes am I going to pick up? Am I going to have enough money to do this? Am I going to have, the resources? What am I going to do about this girl that I like? What am I going to do about, my friends? I don't put as much weight towards it. My friends, a good number of them don't ever hit me up. Ever. Like, we're friends, but do we ever just talk? A good number of them I don't talk with. And I used to be so bugged by that. I used to be like, how are we going to be friends? How are you going to call yourself my friend when you don't know what's going on in my life? You have not reached out. And then I was like, well, I don't know what's going on in their life either. So maybe I should reach out. And I did that for a while. And I was trying my best. I'd reach out, talk to people I hadn't talked to in a while. Just, how are you doing? What's going on? But then it stayed so one-sided that it's like, look, wish them the best. If they talk to you, they talk to you. If you want to talk to them, talk to them. But why make it an issue? It's the same things with the dating. I mean, I used to be so obsessed with like, oh, I gotta talk to this girl. I want to meet this girl. I want to take this girl out. It's too much. It honestly was too much. And it was like affecting how I felt about myself. It's like, yeah, you get rejected, and then you're a bad dude. Nobody loves you. Nobody wants you. That's quite frankly not the truth. Honestly, everything happens for a reason. So if you're getting rejected, maybe that's a good sign from the universe that was not supposed to happen. And I never really took that into consideration until this year. And I've been able to step back, and I've actually been happier. And I have more interactions with girls when I'm not trying as hard. And it's been great. I'm not worried about where my job is going right now. I make my money. I make enough to pay my bills and take care of the things that I want. I'm not worried about all the other, like, how quickly can I move up through the company? It's like, well, it'll happen when it happens, or it won't happen, and I can move on. I always keep my options open. I'm always looking for opportunities, and I'm just living. And it sounds so cliche, like, you can go through life and you're not actually living. But for me, a big part of that was entirely true. You try so hard to be living that you don't actually do any living. And so it's been nice to step back. I meditate. I want to get more into, I don't know. I'm not a fitness nut. Okay, I have people in my life that are absolute fitness nuts. And they love it, and that's their thing, and that's not my thing. I'd like to get more into it a little bit, I just want to have something, I have this podcast that I love, and I still have the shoes, and I love that, and I love the interactions that I have with certain people. But it's been difficult, I guess, to check out and focus on myself because I'm always concerned with other people. That's always how it's been. And so when I don't have to worry about others and others' feelings as much, then it kind of leaves me with my own. And so I've been able to be more self-aware, I guess, figuring out some of these patterns and some of these habits that have been damaging to myself. And I think that everybody should honestly do that. Like, step back a little bit from life and look at your life. And pinpoint areas that you're not happy with, you're frustrated with, and figure out if there's something that you can do to make it better, or if it's something that isn't enriching you. Meditation has been so key for me. I feel like I talked about this last time. I just can't stress enough, like, I love it. And for me, it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of my life. And I'm excited because I think in the next couple weeks I'm going to go camping. And I'm going to go camping by myself. And I'm going to leave everything behind. My phone. I'll stay in the car wherever I park. And just for the weekend, I'm going to go and spend some time by myself. And I'm really excited for it. I'm also kind of nervous because I'm not a huge outdoorsman. I'm an Eagle Scout, but like, it's been since I was 14 or something that I was like serious into camping. I mean, a couple of those years I went, camped 30 days out of the year. And now it's like, when is the last time I slept in a tent? And I can't even think of the last time I slept in a tent. It hasn't been recently because I like hotels and I like my own apartment. And that's about it. I slept in a car, I guess, on the way moving back across the country, and that was awful. Slept in the bed in the truck, essentially. But I think it'll be nice to get out and just cleanse everything for a little while. I don't have to worry about social media. I don't have to worry about other people. I can just go out, spend some time in nature, and hopefully, gain some perspective from it and come back with a better idea of what I want to do and how I want to move forward. So, I'm not entirely sure what week that'll be, but I probably won't podcast since I'll probably leave on a Friday. I'll podcast when I get back, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience in the woods. I think that this podcast started out as like, I can go somewhere with it. And the more I've done it, the more I've realized it's not about anybody else. It is purely for me and giving myself an outlet to talk. And then, some people listen to it. And that's completely fine. It's not about monetizing it, reaching thousands or millions of people, as cool as that might be. It'll be nice to have this, I guess. I'm trying to keep up every week, and honestly, like tonight, you can tell by the quality of this podcast, I really didn't want a podcast tonight. And I may take weeks off, but I'm trying to stay consistent and do my best in order to put something out every week. I may investigate, I guess, carrying like a little recorder around and recording myself just like on my phone and then splicing my thoughts together a little bit. Because it seems like I have all these things when I'm driving. I'll have all these ideas and thoughts, and then I get home, sit down in front of the computer, and I just blank out. I'm tired. I'm honestly really tired. Every day it seems like. And so hopefully I can find something that energizes me. and gives me a little more purpose. I feel like I have a purpose, but I'm not sharing it right now, and I guess I haven't even really made steps in order to figure it out. And that's okay. So, I don't know. Next week, I expect a podcast, but it may not happen next week. I might go camping next week. Who knows? Gotta figure all that out. It'll be fun. But once again, thanks for listening, and have a safe weekend.